Thank you very much. Let us take some questions now from the audience. Could you please ask your questions in a microphone? Thank you very much. I'm from the IFRI. A question for Mr. Message. You spoke about preventive diplomacy. Now, I believe that this is one of the main challenges, of course. Mr. Montbrial mentioned this as well, the issue of regional responsibility. So how can we proceed with such preventive diplomacy if we cannot anticipate on the crises that might occur? Now, one of the main examples here is the war in Georgia, which we could not anticipate, and we were unable to anticipate the financial crisis as well. So how do we proceed? How do we carry out preventive diplomacy in that case?
Pa svakako da ja polazim prije svega od onoga što se dogodilo na prostoru bivše Jugoslavije. Dakle, Jugoslavija je imala ustav po kome su njene republike bile države sa pravom na ujedinjenje, ali i sa pravom na odcijepljenje. Budući da je Jugoslavija imala tri glavna integrativna faktora, što uvijek naglašavam, to je Tito sa svojom karizmom, to je komunistička partija koja je bila više nacionalna,
Yugoslavia was impacted by three main factors, communism, Tito, and the Yugoslav army that obeyed Tito. When these three parameters were weakened with the end of Tito, part of Yugoslavia disappeared. And then there was the fall of communism, and the army also bore the brunt of all this. And the economic players should have understood at the time that a crisis was about to occur, because the army could only obey the orders of the strongest and the fittest, and that was Milosevic. And Milosevic's aim was to extend the borders of Yugoslavia. Now, such a change in borders could only be obtained through war. Now, we did something about this, obviously. We created our own states, we created our own armies, and the borders didn't change. But unfortunately, there were thousands of dead. Now, when I talk about the international community, I am referring to the United Nations family, including the Security Council. I'm also referring to the European Union and all the European Union mechanisms. Now, all these players should have realized that any change in borders would require war. And in that case, it was imperative to take preventive action to prevent this war from occurring. And in order to do so, we should have put our forces on the borders where a war was likely to occur. What happened in Georgia resembles, to a certain extent, what I have just described in Russia and in Acacia. There was a risk of recourse to a force in the absence of a political solution, and preventive action once again was imperative. Once war has already begun, once blood has been shed, the only thing that remains is hatred. This hatred was not the origin of the war, it was a consequence of the war. Once again, I would like to underscore the need to carefully appraise the situation in a given region in order to take the most appropriate preventive action. I'm from the NGO Action contre la faim. A question for Mr. Wade. We have spoken at great length about the financial crisis. Let me remind you that the food crisis has worsened the situation of more than 925 million people who are suffering from malnutrition and hunger. Now, Mr. President, what to do, according to you, should be the proper governance mechanisms that should be implemented worldwide to fight against this scourge, which is hunger? Well, do you know that the Secretary General of the United Nations recently had called for, had urged all the citizens of the world to eradicate poverty from the world and to resolve this food crisis. Well, the food crisis is connected with the financial crisis because all the speculative funds in the oil industry and so on, working on the forward markets, were speculating on an increase in commodity prices to a certain extent. So we were victims of this. In Senegal, we provided an answer to this. We found an answer on the 4th of May. We launched the Goana, which is the agricultural offensive again for nourishment and abundance. We are no longer dependent on the world to meet our food needs, because earlier we used to import 600,000 tons of rice per year. We were the only country to import so much rice. And then we launched this program, the aim of which was to meet certain food targets. There was a chart which was carefully defined with a lot of figures. And 4 months down the road, we have met our targets. We have enough food to feed our population, but we also have a surplus. So we have faced this challenge. We said that we were able to find a solution, and this is what we did. There's going to be a harvest festival soon, and the Secretary General of the United Nations has considered the Goana model as an excellent model to be used in other African countries as well. So this was our solution, an individual solution. We had the political will and to do so, and it also required a certain amount of imagination. Even in the Sahel, we have enough rainfall for at least 3 to 4 months of the year to be able to have food sufficiency. Now, we have to rehaul the system. There are too many different organizations working in the field of development, agriculture. There is so much overlapping, and we have to feed so many civil servants that churn out more and more reports that no one reads. We need one institution with efficient targets for promoting agriculture. We don't need food as such. We need measures to promote agriculture. Because feeding the poor with resources coming from outside is just a stopgap solution. We need support for agriculture. And we need to make sure that